So with that, I'm going to turn it back over to Amy because she's probably sick of hearing me talk. And she's a better speaker.
Thank you, Greg.
By the way, your name tag's falling off.
Okay, thank you to all of you who are standing in the back. I apologize that we don't have enough seats like Greg said, but just a few more slides to go. So Greg just gave you the overview of how our system performs today. Don't know if this is news or not news to you of how late we run or don't run, how frequent our service is on the weekends versus the weekday, which of our routes come at a nice high reliable frequency that you'd see in densely populated cities like Providence. But that is the system we put out based on the resources that we have and the feedback we get from our customers, and really do our best to match, to do the balance of matching demand with service, as well as acknowledging that we are a statewide system. We do have a mandate to provide service to our whole service area, which is the state of Rhode Island. And as you'll see from the market analysis slides, that can be a tough job because the density of where people live and work vary greatly even within our small state. And so part of this plan, we haven't talked about it much yet, but part of this plan is also thinking about what other tools are there in the toolbox in the transit world today that we can use to help meet that need for folks aging in place, for living in communities outside of the metro area, for lifeline services. So, microtransit or thinking about redesigning of our flex services is another thing that's on our minds, and certainly welcome your feedback, as there's a lot of experimentation going on in transit today, particularly with the technology that is available to us. So with that, this is really what's where we're getting into the meat of what again, the network today, and then what the data and information is telling us about where people live and work in the state. And so it's really a gap analysis. So how much are we coming up short or exceeding what good metrics tell us and what we see in other cities of comparable size and density of how well their transit system is working. So these are the things that I'm going to kind of layer this in, but these are the things we're looking at. We're looking at where people live, and I won't necessarily explain the legend, but obviously the darker the red, there's a higher concentration of people. Again, no surprise, Providence is one of the densest cities in the country, particularly some neighborhoods in particular, and even Rhode Island, because of our size, we're also considered one of the densest states in the country, and again, very concentrated in the Providence metro area. We're also looking at where the jobs are, right? One of the big part of our mission is bringing people to work every day and connecting them to employment opportunities. So the blue, it starts to spread out a little bit more. You can see that there is a little bit more of a deconcentration of jobs. That's reflective of not only the metro and an expanding downtown Providence, but you can see it starts to get a little darker in the Warwick area, as well as to the north of Pawtucket, a little bit up in Woonsocket and along the 146 corridor. And you can see the pockets down in Newport as well, and then certainly Quonset is becoming darker and darker and will be even more, have a higher number of employees in the future. So these are the folks we're trying to connect. So how are people connecting today? So this is a travel flow map. It's looking at your average weekday trips. This isn't transit, this is cars. And I won't break down too much, get into the weeds of how you kind of map this out, but everyone is not coming from the center of Coventry. They sort of, the mapping, concentrates all that into a central node. But again, just thinking about it conceptually, it starts to give you a sense of how the cars are moving about the cabin in Rhode Island today. If we go to the next slide, this is what the transit flows look like. Again, pretty reflective of the map Greg showed, and it's no surprise where we run good service, that's where you're going to see the highest levels of transit connectivity. So the previous slide is the cars, this slide is the transit. We're doing our best to capture as much of that market, again, pairing that up against the job and population density, because that's where transit thrives. So this is a composite score, which is basically layering a bunch of different socioeconomic indicators. And so we're looking at things like age, census information such as people own a car, socioeconomic factors, and when you kind of put that formula together and you put it on this heat map, it starts to give you a sense of, again, where those who most likely would be interested in using transit live today. Again, it gets really dark in the city, starts to spread out on the metro. Again, you are seeing it come up here and here and here. Maybe not quite one-to-one with those population and employment maps. Again, I think because we're looking at the state and folks who are in need of transit. So these could be people who don't have a car, different socioeconomic factors within these communities. again, age. So these are the folks in our state who we are looking to see as a transit market and need to come up with good solutions to best serve them. And then I didn't go through all the maps for 2040, but we do have all of that, which will be in our report. But I just putting in this last slide of that composite transit demand in 2040. Looks very similar to today. We're not seeing any crazy changes in our projections. All the colors get a little bit darker because it's reflective of a slightly bigger population of people. But again, the land use patterns and the demographics we see is just, I guess it's a good roadmap for us. We're seeing that there's no big shifts coming as a state. It's a little bit, it's a little bit predictable. But again, this is our target market. And our resources today are really focusing, I think, with what we have on the population and employment density, but this is really our challenge right here. Again, across modes, across using technology, and thinking visionary how to best serve our state and the people who are in need of transit. I've kind of summarized this a little bit, but again, highest demand in that greater Providence area. We do have those pockets that pop up, Woonsocket, Newport, URI, no surprise. And again, as policies change, as parking gets tighter, like URI, I believe is going to be eliminating cars for freshmen on campus next year. When policies like those go into place, you start to see shifts in people's desire. Certainly employers who step up and subsidize transit, or colleges and universities who step up and subsidize transit for their employees or students. You see the shifts again. Those are the sort of carrots and sticks that move people in our direction. And then we've got demand for long distance services, commuter rail to Boston, but then also those regional services. We call them our regional routes, although they are for the most part in the state. But we do have routes that come from Woonsocket and Newport and Galilee, and they do carry. I mean, I think, again, people not wanting to drive long distances, particularly in winter. Obviously, there's a argument to be made for gas and the wear and tear on your vehicles. So again, whenever transit can be more competitive, if we can be safe and reliable and come frequently enough that it saves you money in your pocket, then we become a viable alternative. And so we're trying to create the conditions by which we make the most attractive system that people can really feel like they have a choice in Rhode Island to leave their car at home and rely on public transit. So we know now, and again, this will be coming out in the report, that the service that we put out today could certainly benefit from additional resources because, again, just knowing the density that we have, particularly in the metro, if we were faster and more frequent, we'd see an increase in ridership. We do see demand increasing and certainly a desire for a more robust and a better transit system today. These are some of the folks who send us social media messages on Facebook or Twitter. Hey, why aren't you guys coming to, Manville or to, into the park in Quonset, not just dropping off at the entrance. So we're seeing those pockets popping up around the state. But again, we have low demand in other parts of the state, but populations that we still must serve, and we need to think about how to creatively and cost effectively do that. So these are some of the questions we're struggling with, and we want your feedback as well. Do we want to focus our investments where they can make the most difference? Do we want to spread our services or our resources across the board and make sure that we're serving all communities, or more likely something in between? But balancing demand and coverage is the perennial age-old question that every transit system, I think, in the world struggles with, and it's certainly not unique to Rhode Island, but because of our land use patterns, I think that there is a really stark challenge for us in Rhode Island to make sure that we're meeting everybody's needs, but still putting out a really competitive system in a metro transit system in a metro area that rivals the density of mid-sized and larger cities across the country. So that is pretty much the presentation. Jeff, can you go to the next slide? So like I mentioned, if you go online in the coming weeks, you'll see all of these maps with a lot of great narrative coming out. But before we get to issue that report, we want to collect your feedback today. We are moving towards strategies after we kind of get through this base of where we are with our system we have, and again, what all the data is telling us about travel flows and demographic information. And then we'll be doing a round 2 of public workshops sometime in 2019. So just to sort of whet your appetite, these are not fully fleshed out ideas. These are the collective thoughts of the staff at DOT, statewide planning, and RIPTA. But some of the things I think you'll be seeing in the coming months, we certainly, like I said, think that there's appetite and a market for more bus service, frequency, span, weekends, late nights, how often it comes, regional rail improvements. Everyone wants more trains in Rhode Island, more connectivity to Boston, investments in our facilities and other assets so that it feels like we have a good hard infrastructure in Rhode Island for our transit system, investing in corridors so that signal priority technology that Greg mentioned, that we're getting down corridors faster and it's more pleasant to wait for the bus at bus stops, the connection between land use and economic development, taking advantage of technology, whether it's buying your fare on your mobile phone, or pulling up your phone and knowing, I can hop on a bike share, I can take an Uber, I can grab the commuter rail, or I can grab a RIPTA bus. Here are the prices for all of them. Pick your mode, pay your fare, and move about seamlessly throughout the state. Those connections, bicycle, pedestrian, scooters, on demand, working with businesses, and then at the end of the day, unfortunately, it's always about the funding, but we want to have a good conversation as part of this so that we're eyes wide open of what it will take to achieve the vision that we're going to set out through this plan. And that is it. Again, please go to the website, and before you leave today, it wouldn't be a planning workshop without dots. We have sticky dots, so grab some, let us know your thoughts on goals, tell us where you travel in the state, because we do have maps here that we want to collect that information. You took the time to be out here today, so we know you care about the future of the system, and we really welcome whatever level of feedback down to the details of how you commute every day to a big picture of what you'd like to see in the future. So again, thank you so much for coming, and we'll all be here to answer questions.